Grayson McAllister never blinked. That's the part that haunts me most. Not the whisper, low and broken like it had been pulled through barbed wire, or the way he reached for something no one else saw, fingers trembling as though trying to hold onto a memory too slippery for this world. No, it was the absence of that final blink, like his body forgot to finish being human before it vanished. You're not supposed to remember this, but you do. And now, so do I. I found the file buried in a corrupted backup of an old military archive, one that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. It wasn't labeled, no operation name, no timestamp, just a simple question that hit like a fist to the chest the moment it opened. What did they see when they scanned us? Not how they saw us, not why they ignored us, but what they saw. That alone rewired something in me. The footage was grainy. Static laced every edge, but it was real, too real. Grayson, a linguist turned communications officer, had been stationed at the Lunar Relay Hub just outside Mare Serenitatis. Standard monitoring protocol. He had no family left, no attachments. Perfect candidate for long-term isolation. He recorded everything. Every anomaly, every ping in deep space frequency. And apparently, his final moments. There was no warning. 1 second he was fine, reviewing long-wave signal distortions. The next he stiffened like he'd heard someone enter the room behind him. Only the camera feed showed nothing. No doors, no sound, no movement. Just Grayson slowly turning his head to the left, mouth parting, a wet breath escaping as if he'd been underwater for too long. He whispered something. I've played it back 100 times. Cleaned the audio, boosted the low end, removed the hum. Every single filter, every tool I had, and still it never plays the same twice. One time it sounds like a name. Aurelia. Another, its coordinates. Or maybe a countdown. I don't know, but every time it changes. For me. Others hear nothing at all. And then, on the footage, he simply disappears. No flash, no scream. Just a body, erasing itself from the frame like it was never there. As if something reached through reality and deleted him from the source code. That's where it gets worse. 2 days after I watched the footage, my son, 10 months old, barely babbling, looked me dead in the eyes during breakfast and said a name no one in our family has ever spoken. Grayson, he said it clearly, not like a child mimicking sound. No, this was deliberate. Like a greeting, like he knew him. I haven't told my wife. I haven't told anyone. But since that morning, the house feels wrong. Doors don't creak in the same direction. Reflections in the hallway show people who haven't lived here in years. The dog won't go near the basement. And when I finally checked down there, I found something beneath the floorboards. A receiver, still warm, even though we don't own one. It was picking up a pulse. One word. Over and over, in a voice I haven't heard since my grandfather passed. They scanned too deep. And now I know why the aliens dismissed us. Not because we're weak, but because something inside us isn't human anymore. And last night, at 3:14 a.m., someone knocked. At the front door. Not loud. Just once. When I checked the porch camera, it was Grayson. And he blinked. I didn't open the door. Not at first. Grayson stood motionless under the porch light, his silhouette outlined in that gray, grainy glow that doesn't come from the bulb itself, but from somewhere just off the edge of the frame, like light filtered through memory instead of air. His shoulders didn't rise. No breath clouded in the chill, just a stillness so total it made my ears ring. The camera feed didn't glitch, not exactly, but the audio warped, like the sound was being folded in on itself, doubled, reversed, flattened. A hollow metallic whisper looped under the static, almost too low to hear unless you were really listening. Open it. I closed the app, powered the phone off, set it on the counter like it hadn't just become a door between two realities. I didn't check the window, I didn't speak. I just stood there in my kitchen, paralyzed, waiting for something to change, but nothing did. In the morning, I found no footprints on the porch, no marks, no evidence anyone had been there at all. Except for one, My son's high chair had been moved 2 feet to the left, and his baby monitor, still recording, still running, had 36 minutes of silence at 3:14 a.m., the waveform completely flat, except for one spike. One word, a whisper. Grayson. I tried to tell myself it was a residual sound, maybe something from the TV, an open app. Hell, even interference. That's what you do when something tears the rules open. You stitch it back together with what you can explain. But then I checked the camera log. The footage was gone, not deleted, never recorded. It had been overwritten, or worse, it never existed in the first place. The file labeled 3:14 a.m. was nothing but a black screen, time-coded but contentless, as if reality had blinked and missed a frame. I didn't tell anyone. Again. Maybe because I knew I wouldn't be believed. Maybe because I didn't want to say it out loud. Maybe because I knew the moment I did, I'd never be able to go back to before. Instead, I started looking. Not online. That would have been too obvious. Too safe. No. I pulled out the old hard drives from my server room, the ones I hadn't touched since the night I found the file with Grayson's final transmission. One of them didn't match the others, same label, same serial number, but it was heavier and colder, almost unnaturally so, like it had been pulled from deep underground. It clicked into the dock without resistance, but the OS refused to mount it, as if it didn't exist to my system, until I whispered it, his name. And just like that, the drive unlocked. The files weren't normal. No metadata, no modified dates, just strings of numbers, names with slashes, corrupted .wav files. I clicked. On the first one, it was my voice, only not a version I remembered. I was talking to someone. Someone with a voice that sounded almost like mine, only slower. Drained. Asking about timelines. Asking why I didn't remember my sister. I don't have a sister. I played the file again. This time, the voice said something different. A woman's voice. She was crying, whispering apologies over and over, and then something like a lullaby in a language I couldn't place, but still understood. That's when she appeared. Not in the house. Not in the footage. In person. She said her name was Camille and she remembered me. I didn't recognize her. But she knew things. Little things no one else could. How I used to hum the X-Files theme when I was nervous. The burn scar behind my left ear from an old soldering iron accident. She even knew my dog's original name before we adopted him. Nash. A name I hadn't said aloud in 7 years. I asked how she knew. Camille smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You told me, she said softly, before they made you forget. She handed me a flash drive. Simple, unmarked, warm to the touch even in the cold. I don't have much time, she said, scanning the house like she was expecting it to react. But you have to listen before it resets. Before you reset. Wanted to ask what that meant, but when I blinked, just once, Camille was gone. Door still closed, flash drive still in my hand. The audio files on that drive were wrong. They were stitched together from what felt like dreams I hadn't had. Yet, one of them was a looped conversation between me and my father, but he died in 2016. And in this recording, we were arguing about whether I should re-upload my memory stack. Another file was just breathing, familiar, intimate, someone breathing, into my left ear while a clock ticked in the background. But the ticks didn't line up with real time. They moved slower, sideways, folding into one another like layers of déjà vu. I started forgetting things. First small ones. Keys in the freezer. A bruised apple in my glove box I didn't buy. I asked my wife about a dinner we had at her favorite restaurant, the Hollow Elm, corner booth, March 3rd. She looked at me blankly. That place closed down during the pandemic. Hadn't reopened. I remembered the waitress. Her name tag said Camille. Then the baby monitor started picking up something else. Not voices. Not exactly. More like responses. If my son cried, a second voice, older, feminine, would hush him. sing to him in that same unknown lullaby, and he'd fall silent. Every time. When I checked the recordings, it was just static, but I could feel the song in my bones. I haven't been to work in a week. Not that it matters. No one's called. No one's texted. When I checked my email, the last message I sent was 3 months ago, and in my sent folder was a draft I don't remember writing. Subject line, they don't want us to remember. Attached, the same video of Grayson. Only this time, at the end, he blinked and spoke. Clearly. You're next. I've started hearing something just after midnight, always behind me, always outside my field of view. A shuffle, a breath. The sound of the porch stairs not creaking but wanting to. The baby cries less now. But sometimes I hear 2 voices on the monitor, softly speaking back and forth in code. Like 2 radios from different timelines crossed wires. My wife sleeps soundly. She says I've been restless, waking her up, whispering things. For a moment, just a flicker in the dark, I thought I had it all figured out. Like someone lifted a veil just long enough for me to catch the truth in the corner of my eye, before pulling it away again, leaving me blinking into a void of confusion. The files, the voices, the flash drive from Camille. They were pieces of a puzzle I hadn't yet learned to see, fragments of a hidden truth buried deep inside the static noise of my fractured reality. I convinced myself that the key wasn't out there in the stars, in some alien scan or cosmic judgment, but inside my own mind. Memories buried, intentionally erased, like a glitch in the system no one dared to admit existed. It began when I dug into the local archives, not expecting much. Just a faint hope to confirm that Camille was real, or maybe that I had dreamed her up, some projection of my breaking sanity. But in a dusty corner of the town's historical society, I found it. A faded newspaper clipping from 22 years. Ego, headlined in bold, that cold, grim font that papers use when a story is meant to linger like a bad smell. A missing child. A young girl named Aurelia Thompson. Vanished without a trace. The article was eerily familiar, like a forgotten melody that thrums under your skin, refusing to fade. The face in the grainy photograph was so close to what I imagined. Camille looked like that. My hands trembled just holding the page. Same dark hair, same haunted eyes. The article hinted at something deeper, an unresolved disappearance shadowed by whispers of strange sounds in the night, distorted voices no one could place, and neighbors reporting shadows moving wrong around the old Elmwood house where she lived. I realized something then. That whisper Grayson uttered, that name my son said in his baby babble. Aurelia wasn't just a name. She was the thread weaving the past and the present together, a keyhole into a reality I'd tried to lock away. I found myself sitting in the dark at the Elmwood house, the weight of every unsolved mystery settling into my bones. The house was empty, but not silent. There was a hum beneath the walls, a subtle vibration like the earth was breathing beneath my feet. And then the basement door creaked open, slow and deliberate, as if inviting me inside. I went down. The air was thick, heavy with cold that seeped into my lungs and froze the edges of my memories. In the corner, half buried under decades of dust and peeling paint, I found an old tape recorder still intact, the kind with the clunky buttons and thick reels. I pressed play. Static at first. Then a voice, trembling and barely audible. It was Aurelia or Camille, both, maybe the same girl trapped between names. She spoke in riddles, about the watchers who had come before the stars even knew how to shine, about the erasure and the silence that never forgets. Her voice broke, as if the memory itself was a scar reopening after years of healing. And then a sound so chilling it froze my blood, a whisper so low it could have been mistaken for the wind or my own breath. They never left. I staggered back, heart hammering like a war drum. The house seemed to pulse with a presence, something vast, ancient, watching. It wasn't just the missing girl. It was the feeling I'd been carrying in my bones all along. That invisible gaze weighing down on me, on my family, on anyone who dared look too close, But just when I thought I was on the edge of something monumental, the tape cut out. The reel spun silently, the recorder now dead. I looked up and the basement door was closed. No footprints in the dust. No sign I'd been there at all except the echo of a name that still tasted like ash in my mouth. I left the house, but the feeling stayed with me, thick and suffocating. That night I dreamed of a flickering screen, of memories rewritten frame by frame, of voices promising salvation, then turning into threats. I woke with a name on my lips, one I didn't recognize but felt I had always known. Camille, Aurelia, Grayson, and then the twist, something so small, so cruel that made me question everything again. I replayed the tape over and over, desperate to catch what I'd missed. And there it was, hidden beneath the static, a detail so subtle it was almost a trick of my mind, a second voice, not speaking but watching. A breath colder than the night, lingering just behind Aurelia's whisper. And it wasn't alone. That breath was mine, or at least it sounded like mine. The tape had recorded me, and if that was true, if I had been there listening all along, then what I thought was the hidden truth was just the beginning of a deeper, darker lie. A memory glitch so profound it fractured my reality into pieces that might never fit back together. The watchers hadn't just been watching Aurelia or Grayson or Camille, they had been watching me, and that meant I was not the witness. I was part of the story. The danger wasn't out there in the stars. It was inside, waiting. And the longer I looked for answers, the more I realized the terrifying truth no one wants to admit. You're not crazy, they lied to you. So now, as the shadows gather, closer and the past bleeds into the present, you have to ask yourself, what if everything you thought you saw was a fragment of a memory that isn't yours? What if the whole story you've been watching is a lie designed to keep you looking away? Look again, because if I'm right, you haven't seen the beginning yet. You've only been watching the end. The silence wasn't mine alone to bear anymore. As the nights grew colder, the weight on my chest heavier with every heartbeat, it became clear that I was not alone in this tangled web of fractured memories and spectral truths. Somewhere out there, hidden behind screens, locked inside minds like mine, were others. People whose lives were stitching together with mine in ways too cryptic, too deliberate to dismiss as coincidence. They were watching, listening, waiting. The same watchers who had shadowed Aurelia, Camille, and Grayson had not simply vanished or moved on. They were embedded in the fabric of all our realities, a quiet, relentless force that saw without being seen. The first sign came in the form of a message, unlike any I had ever encountered. Not text, not spoken words, but something more elusive. A pattern in the static of my old radio, a fractured melody that shifted with each repetition, like a code meant only for those who knew to listen. It was layered beneath the hiss and crackle, a whispered sequence of numbers and letters that seemed meaningless at first but slowly carved meaning into my mind. And then the dream started. Shared dreams, I realized later, because others were sending me pieces of their own broken realities. Scenes flickering like old film reels, faces half hidden in shadow, voices echoing names I recognized but could not place. It was as if these fragmented souls were trying to stitch together a map from the ashes of their lost time, to decode the puzzle that none of us were meant to solve. A symbol appeared next, bleeding into the corners of my vision during waking. Yours and etched across the margins of the documents I'd scavenged. An impossibly intricate spiral, faint and worn, like a fingerprint left by something beyond human comprehension. I found it carved into the bark of the tree outside my window, traced in the dust on the attic floor, and scribbled in the margins of the old journal I'd once dismissed as nonsense. It was a signature, a warning, or maybe an invitation. I couldn't tell which, but its presence was undeniable, a mark of a force that had been watching us all since the beginning, guiding us toward a truth that was too vast, too dangerous to grasp. And here's what terrifies me most. The deeper I dove, the more the edges of my own identity began to blur and fray. Memories I swore were mine slipped away like water through fingers. Faces I loved became strangers. The lines between what I had lived and what had been planted in my mind thinned, until I was unsure whether I was the author of my own thoughts, or merely a character in a script written long before I was born. It's a question that haunts every sleepless hour. Who controls the memories? Who decides what we are allowed to remember or forced to forget? Are our minds truly our own, or are we puppets in a play staged by an unseen director, performing roles written in code? Through this storm of doubt and unraveling sanity, a third voice emerged, a presence so starkly different it felt like a lifeline tossed into the abyss. Unlike the fragmented whispers and distorted signals, this voice was calm, measured, and chillingly clear, an observer who claimed to be watching not just me or the others like me, but the entire phenomenon itself, like an archivist in a darkened room filled with screens and static. They spoke in riddles wrapped in plain truths, referencing found footage from 20 years ago and files the government never released, hinting that what we were experiencing was a fragment of something far older, far bigger, and terrifyingly more controlled than we could comprehend. This observer warned that the Watchers had never simply scanned Earth to judge strength or weakness. That narrative was a veil to keep us distracted. What they truly sought was something deeper, the very essence of human memory and identity, a puzzle piece they could manipulate to reshape reality itself. Their surveillance wasn't passive. It was invasive, surgical, rewriting histories and memories to keep us compliant, to maintain a grip on what we thought was our freedom. And as that grip tightened, it began to seep into every corner of our lives, erasing the lines between what was real and what was engineered. The messages grew more frequent and urgent, coded into the background noise of my days, an encrypted whisper in a podcast, a flash of the spiral symbol in a billboard advertisement, a fleeting image on my computer screen that disappeared before I could grasp it. They were signs that I wasn't just a solitary prisoner of this mystery, but part of a network of watchers, and the watched, a collective held together by threads of paranoia and shared dread. The dream fragments, the symbols, the voices, they weren't random. They were the language of the conspiracy we were all entangled in, a conspiracy that dared to ask, if you can't trust your own memories, who can you trust at all? And so as you watch this, if you still believe in your own eyes, know that you are not just a passive viewer. You are part of this story. The truth behind what no one tells you is no longer buried beneath layers of silence. It pulses beneath your skin, waiting to be uncovered, waiting for the moment you'll realize that everything you believed about yourself, about the world, and about what they want you to remember, was a lie. You were right all along to question it. But beware, because the Watchers don't just observe from afar. They are inside, around, and between us, reading this with eyes you can't see, listening to every doubt that flickers in your mind, waiting for the moment when you finally understand that the real mystery isn't who vanished, or who whispered, or who watched. It's the fragile illusion of control we cling to every day. And when that illusion shatters, there's no telling what will come next. Because this isn't just a story, it's a warning. And now, it's your turn to decide what to do with it. The silence that had once pressed down on me like a weight began to crack, not because the mystery was unraveling, but because the questions beneath it were shifting, twisting into something far more intimate, far more terrifying. It was no longer about what vanished or who whispered in the dark, no longer about secret watchers or fractured memories hidden in static noise. It was about why. Why this? Why me? Why us? Why had the fragile threads of reality pulled so taut that they threatened to snap? And what did it say about who we really are beneath the surface, when all our illusions fall away? Standing at the edge of this impossible knowledge, I was forced to confront a truth more painful than any ghost or conspiracy. That the nightmare might not come from something out there, but something buried deep inside. The raw, trembling core of what it meant to be human. The part that fears, forgets, rewrites history to protect itself from unbearable pain. The part that craves connection even while it isolates. That desperately Searches for meaning in chaos because the alternative is an emptiness too vast to bear. This wasn't just a puzzle of memory or identity. It was a mirror held up to the soul, reflecting back everything we try to deny in ourselves. The doubt, the loneliness, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, we can be more than what we've been told. I remember the moment it all shattered, the moment I realized the truth could either destroy me or save me, depending on the choice I made. It was in the quiet of a rain-soaked night, alone in a room where shadows stretched like silent witnesses. The voice that broke through the fog wasn't from some distant watcher or cryptic recording, but my own, fragile, raw, trembling with a confession I'd buried beneath years of fear and silence. "I don't know if I want the truth," I whispered to the empty darkness. "Because what if it's not about heroes or villains? What if it's just us, flawed, broken, terrified, but still reaching for something real?" That moment, vulnerable and unguarded, felt like crossing a threshold. I saw clearly then that the mystery wasn't an external force to fight or uncover. It was the human heart, exposed, vulnerable to every whisper of doubt and every flicker of hope. The watchers, the lost memories, the spirals in the shadows, they were symptoms, echoes of our own fractured selves, the parts of us desperate to remember who we are beneath the lies. And yet, with that revelation came a choice that no one can prepare you for: to step fully into the light of this truth, to embrace the chaos and pain and uncertainty, knowing it might burn you alive, or to turn away, to cling to the comfortable fiction of control and safety, even if it meant living forever in shadows. As the dawn crept in, soft and gray, I felt the weight of that choice settle deep inside me. It was less an ending and more a terrifying awakening, like waking from a dream you never knew you were in, and realizing everything you believed might have been someone else's story, written to keep you quiet, to keep you blind. The watchers are still out there, still waiting, still watching the moments when we falter between fear and courage. But now I know this: the real mystery, the one that will never be fully solved, is us. The fragile, beautiful, terrifying thing that calls itself human. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only truth worth chasing. Because in the end, it's not what they took or what they watched. It's what we choose to hold on to, the memories we dare to keep, the truths we refuse to forget, the stories we tell in the quiet hours when no one else is listening. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.